hard companies are working across Europe. There is a spirit out there. I see it in Spain, I see it in Italy, I see it in Sweden, I see it in Holland. We really want to do business. And we have some really good assets as well. We have a highly skilled workforce. We have, in comparison, a strong infrastructure. There are always challenges to the infrastructure. And the key thing, something happened during the fall. Because of the hard work that was being done by federations like COE or Confindustria in Italy, we worked hard in Brussels. Suddenly, the I word was mentioned by the Commission: industry. I fully understand the Commission having focused during the pandemic on the vaccine. I salute that. And with the Russian aggression in Ukraine, we saw the Commission stepping in, showing a united Europe. But don't forget about industry and business. Suddenly we heard President von der Leyen talking about industry and talking about business, and we saw a lot of initiatives coming out, faster than we're used to in Brussels. The Net Zero Act, the Critical Raw Material Act, things starting to happen. So on that note, I would say we're in a really, really tough position. But we need to be positive, and there are signs of reason to be positive.
Con los comicios al Parlamento Europeo.
Yes, in the European Parliament in 24, European institutions will be in pre-election mode very soon. The Spanish presidency of the Union will only last 6 months. At least part of it could be affected by the general elections that are going to take place in Spain. So then it takes time to form the new government. Is that enough time, do you think? Are these the right conditions in order to achieve significant results during the Spanish presidency? Julio Antonianzas asks, do you think it is a good decision to bring forward the general elections in Spain when the government had announced its commitment with European institutions during the Spanish presidency? When making this decision, do you think the Spanish president should have thought more about the commitment acquired with Europe and not think so much about his own interest? Jose Luis Eras asks, what could be the impact of business activity to have a presidency of the European Union which is so accidented because of the elections?
Thank you. This almost felt like El Pais interview. Some of you might have read it. I got the opportunity to talk to one of your really good journalists last week, and I spoke to the team and Marcus at BusinessEurope and said, what will be the topic? Well, the topic will be Europe. I think the first 10 questions were very much focused on what's happening in Spain. I think the expert when it comes to Spain is for sure Antonio. So we're lucky to live in democracies. At times I think we take that for granted in the same way as honestly we take the EU for granted. And I can get back to that. So if you decide to call an election or not, be it in Sweden or in Spain, that will always be a national matter. Saying that there is not time enough, I would turn that question around to say that you just have to seize the opportunity. 6 months is a huge opportunity to be able to influence what is happening. And this is a tipping point. It is a tipping point. Because I rest assured, in Washington, they will not say, well, unfortunately, there are the Spanish elections moved. So I think we'll hold it back a bit on the IRA. Or the Chinese will say, then we sort of stop the progress we are going. We're going to wait for the Spanish. There will always be an election. And let's be happy that we live in a place where we actually can vote. So I think you have to handle both things. Will it probably make it a bit more complicated? Hey, we're businesswomen and businessmen. I mean, that's everyday life for us. They shouldn't have it that easy, the politicians. So I think, yes, there is time. And it's also important to keep in mind that this is not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a continuous process. I spoke to His Excellency, the ambassador, who told me that the Swedish Prime Minister is coming here on Saturday or Sunday. And of course, you have a Swedish presidency that will work into the Spanish presidency and then into the Belgian presidency. So my call would be, make the best possible use of the presidency. Best possible use. I mean, in Sweden, we had the situation where the government just came into office. And everyone said, how should they be able to cope with the presidency? I salute them for bringing the focus on competitiveness to the table. They made the decision to say competitiveness will be key during our presidency. That, in addition to also, of course, handling the the Russian war in Ukraine. That Spain will have to do as well. So, no, there is for sure time, and you need to spend it wisely. Why? Because, Antonio, you talked about family. This is also about family. It's the responsibility to our children and grandchildren to make the best use of it. And then the question is, but what can we influence? That said, you're in such a better position than, say, the Swedish presidency. Because as I just said, what happened in the fall is we got the Net Zero Act on the table, the Critical Raw Materials Act. God forbid we have also the due diligence. We have the revision of the energy market. And not the least, given where you are both in terms of geography but in commitment, we have the Mercosur and the potential free trade agreements with Chile and Mexico. This is an excellent time to put a mark in what's happening. You will deal with these important acts. And as I said, they're a starting point. When we look, for example, at the Net Zero Act, you can tweak it in such a better way. And now I will get back to talking like on supply chains. In the Net Zero Act, it's really a bit too narrow. You're trying to cherry pick a supply chain, just making it into solar or just making it into wind farms. And of course, if you're in business, you know that's not the way supply chains works. So a huge opportunity, but also a huge responsibility. And I can assure you that from Business Europe side, we will seize that responsibility, and I know COE is already doing it. So no, it's not the time to say, oh, it's too tricky within Spain, and we have no possibility to have an influence on this. So what would I then call out? What would be my wish list? What would I like the Spanish presidency to focus on? Not surprisingly, I think top of the list would be cutting back on the regulatory burden. It needs to be easier to do business, and here you can help out. We had the call out by President von der Leyen saying that the EU needs to cut reporting by 25%. I always try to, when I talk to her, say, I didn't hear that. You said cut regulations by 25%, and she just laughs at me. But it is a starting point. And my experience is that President von der Leyen, what she calls out, she delivers. And we, for sure, in the last month in our meeting with different commissioners, have noted that they're affected by this. It is a huge call, and saying that 25% needs to go. It will be a challenge, but von der Leyen will push them to do so. This will hugely improve the ease of doing business. And I think you all know, sitting in boards now, we talk about CSRD, and you just become pale in your face. The only ones, for starters, the auditors looked happy because they saw a new business. Now they're starting to look a bit pale as well because they don't know what to deliver. The second thing is we do have a shared diamond, and that is the single market. It's a vibrant 30-year-old person. We spoke about services. Services still needs to be deepened. We need to take better advantage of the single market. It's a huge potential. And it doesn't cost. We're not talking about adding new funds or something. These two first points are free of charge. Free of charge. And they will create a huge, huge upside. Something that is not spoken about a lot in Brussels currently is energy prices. That would be my third call out. It might be the time of the year, but I would say that once the winter comes back again, with lots of snow in Sweden, maybe even a bit cold in Madrid, energy will come back to the table. Why? Because it's part of the pull from the US. If you look at gas wholesale prices at current levels, when we feel that now energy is feeling okay, you know it. It's 5 to 6 times higher in Europe as compared to the US. If you're in the process industry, this makes the difference. This is why we see companies like Bayer, BASF, or battery maker Northvolt calling out that they're considering moving production sites to the US. Also important to keep in mind is last winter, not all companies, and for sure it was tougher for SMEs, had energy hedges. So the politicians cannot just look at the spot price and say, okay, the spot price will be lower the winter of 23-24, because what's actually the cost for industry underlying, I think, will be higher. Because as you know, it's been extremely hard and expensive to get hold of forward contracts. The fourth call would be for skills and innovation. Europe's working population is shrinking. I think we are some 3.5 to 4 million down in the working population already, and if you look ahead to 2050, we see a drastic decrease in the workforce. If business and industry stays in Europe, we need to build on and increase our advantage on the skilled labor side and get back on the innovation side. We know that the US is spending almost a double on R&D as we're doing in Europe. If you fall behind on this, in due course we will fall behind in growth as well. Final point, getting back to the Mercosur. The politicians can help us create the more resilient supply chains. Give us the new markets and the options to safeguard our value chains. You are for sure, together with Portugal, the driving force and door opener to that market. We need to get Chile, Mexico, fingers crossed also Mercosur into place. And this is a tough discussion. It shouldn't be a tough discussion, and here we need to work harder to explain that this is good for Europe. It's good for the countries we trade with. So that would be my sort of 5-point wish list. Is it doable? Yes. Is it honestly expensive for the politicians? No.
Presidente, Business Europe.
Business Europe is asking from the European Union a more ambitious and efficacious competitiveness agenda. Our competitiveness is under threat. Investment is getting further and further away from Europe. And these could be the questions related to that. Do you think that the response of the European Union is enough to the IRA in the US? Is there enough money on the table in Europe to counterattack the stimulus and the attraction of companies to the US? And I'm also asked, do you think there is a risk that the Union will get far away from the path of growth?
Asked is saying that, Fredrik, you're being alarmistic. You're calling out something that is not there. Then I answer as I started. We do this for a reason, because the backbone of Europe is its industry and business. Do European politicians dare to take the bet that this will not happen? When we ask our members, how do you look upon the investment climate in Europe during the last 3 years? The signal we get from Spain, from Germany, from Finland, from Belgium is, unfortunately, it's getting worse. 9 out of 10 is saying that it's getting worse. Well, good for you, then you have a whole bunch of alarmistic people to join you. But then let's look at the facts. Between 2019 and 2021, foreign direct investments in the EU dropped by 2/3. And then you go, oh, that's the pandemic. In the US, they increased by 2/3. So it's not about the pandemic. Well, then you say that it's really about the circumstances of the pandemic that sort of created this weird situation. Well, then look at greenfield investment last year in Europe versus the US. Europe, down some 15%. The US, up 15%. So it is for sure happening in terms of the investments. And I think when we all sit down, as you normally do on a board in the November-December meeting, you revisit your investment decisions, you look at your cash flow, and try to predict what's happening. Energy costs makes a huge difference. The regulatory burden makes a huge difference. Having to wait 10 years to start a factory might just make you say, okay, let's do it somewhere else. It's not even about the cost, but if I have to wait 10 years, it's not even a business opportunity. Then you can talk about, is there enough money on the table? And at times I think the politician wants to bring it to a money on the table discussion. One thing with the IRA, which is important to call out, we like that the US is stepping on the path of the green transition. That is something we've asked for. Now they're doing it. It's also creating a lot of business opportunities for many European companies. because we sit on some leading technologies when it comes to the green transition. That is a good one. Then we can never accept in a concept like the IRA where there is discriminatory parts, basically saying that you're not allowed to sell European cars in electric vehicles in the US. That we can never accept. But sort of the underlying thing that we want a green transition. And we've put funds into that in Europe as well. And we were ahead of the US. But for me, it very much sums, you can always have a discussion. If you look at the money in different European initiatives, is it less or is it more than the IRA? Let's say it's somewhere in the same range. I think in Europe we need to have that money to get faster to the companies and the right projects. We're a bit slow on that one. But on the balance, I think it's roughly the same size. But we would more call out not the size of the carrot, but the size of the stick. Why should it be so hard to do business in Europe? We're running ahead in the twin transition. Maybe a couple of years ago, business and industry was falling behind, but now we're running ahead of the politicians. We're seeing and seizing the business opportunities both on the digital side and on the green side. What's happening now is we're seeing another transition, which is the geopolitical transition. And that geopolitical transition with the Russian war in Ukraine is creating a pressure on us, primarily on the energy side, and that's why we need a regulatory breathing space.
Presidente,
Chairman, many European business organization members of Business Europe, like the COE in Spain, have expressed their dissatisfaction for the way in which the recovery plan funds and resilience funds, next generation funds, are being implemented. What is your position regarding this? What is being done badly, or what should be done differently, you think?
Oh, that is a big question that I think varies a lot across country. I know COE is doing a great job in calling that out on a national level. To, I think, put it in a nutshell, it's again about the speed. I think business nowadays is moving so fast. So in the same thing, I see the similarity with the permitting procedures, where we're so much slower than our competitors, both in Asia and in the US. There needs to always be a competitiveness check when you implement a new regulation, or also the overarching direction of the Commission, including the way these funds are being set up and distributed. You need to have a competitiveness check and see, is this improving European competitiveness, or is this honestly making it, slowing it down? Because the competition for sure is running so much faster than we are.
In the Business 7 meeting held in Tokyo, on the occasion of the G7 meeting, where the markets participated, companies asked of the superpowers more solidarity between themselves and with other countries to face geopolitical tensions. What is your diagnosis on the impact in Europe of the war in Ukraine and the expansive waves of actions of the China, the US, and Russia? When do you think the end of the war will happen? There seems to be an escalation now with the Ukrainian counteroffensive.
To start with the last question first, it's not often or never, at least I have a standpoint or a view or an answer to a question. I think it's in my personality. When it comes to the end of the Ukrainian war, honestly, I have no clue. It's when looking at it, and to your point, the escalation, and I think it's extremely hard to foresee that. So I wish I had, and I also spend a lot of time talking to people within the different armed forces, and honestly, you get the same answer there. Getting back to the solidarity piece, I think it might sound that I'm focusing on what the Commission and Europe is not doing well enough, and I guess that is in a sense our task. I'm almost like, you know, the parent wanting the kid always to do better because you have the opportunity. When it comes to how the European Union has acted during the Russian war in Ukraine, I think there has been a great job done. And I think we also shown Russia that we are Europe. I think they did not expect that. They expected Europe to crack, and we have not done so. And so I think that is that part. When it comes to the economical aspects of it, and of course what goes first when it comes to Ukraine is the support for the Ukrainian people, and I cannot imagine what they are going through. That said, if you look at the economical impact from a Business Europe side and in all our federations, we've fully and 100% supported the implemented sanctions. In a majority of companies, I think you've also taken further steps than what's within the sanctions. And that I mean by taking the economical consequences of leaving Russia altogether. What we on this side call out, and Marcus, you and I sat down with Commissioner McGuinness last week, and this is a bit of a technicality. There have been so many sanction packages that honestly, as a business, it's hard to get it all right. I think we're up to 9 or 10 different initiatives now. So what we called for was a bit of a sort of white book or sanctions 101, being able to put everything together so it was easy for businesses to buy to the sanctions. Secondly, there is also a challenge for some companies wanting to leave Russia, having a tough time leaving. That could be that you have directors that are Russian directors that are under sanctions. You get a lot of threats for the staff you have in Russia, so we called out also to get some assistance how to help out in companies that actually want to leave. And finally, there are products and things that are not included in the sanctions for humanitarian reasons, such as pharmaceuticals, etc. And I think there the Commission's needs to be crystal clear, so there is sort of no shaming of companies that are abiding to the sanction and actually bringing that part to the table. So to sum it up, I think business have gone further. This is not something we've called out. This has been an enormous economic stress in some companies, but I think here the EU has really worked and showed its purpose.
President, do you think that the European Union is making the right progress in ecological transition, energy sovereignty, the development of green hydrogen and other renewable sources? What do you think about the future Euro 7 regulation, the regulation that forbids manufacturers selling vehicles with a combustion engine as of 2035, a regulation that for many is born dead?
Ooh, again, a huge question. What if I just said yes or no? I think for me it comes back to the fact that I think several years ago we were in a situation where politicians felt that they needed to push industry and business, and that the twin transition, and particularly the green transition, was being too slow. And of course, being from industry and business, I'm sort of always leaning on that side, but my perception now is that industry is setting the pace. And then that coin has not dropped yet on a political level. They're sort of still stuck several years ago when they thought that if we just add some regulation, we can stop, because industry is part of the problem, not part of the solution. So they keep on cranking out a lot of regulation. I think we in complete agreement what we need to achieve with the Green Deal. There's no doubt about it, and honestly I think it can also be extremely profitable for European companies. But it needs to be done in a manner where you listen to business and industry that will actually put these regulations into practice, because it's, as Antonio said, I'm a runner. I'm running slower now than I did before. If someone tells me you should run the 10K in 50 minutes, I will be very sort of under pressure. But if you tell me to run it in 30 minutes, will I run faster because you say 30 minutes? No, then let's have a discussion how we first can reach the 50. So I think there needs to be changed in mindset. Business and industry is committed to the twin transition. Let's just make it work in a way that doesn't mean that we lose industry and business in Europe and it's ending up in another place.
¿Usted, presidente, cree que
Do you think that we should take a second look at the nuclear energy in Europe? In Spain, Iberdrola said they would be willing to study the extension of the life of their nuclear plants in our country.
Again, a bit of an El País feeling. I think the energy mix of any European country needs to be decided on each separate country level. That said, when I call out and say that we need supply of energy at a competitive price, I think you cannot underestimate the effect of supply. Every kilowatt hour counts. So I think we honestly, my personal opinion is, we cannot sort of exclude any energy initiative, because I think I would love the situation and challenge the situation where we have a discussion saying that we have too much electricity in Europe. Would that be a problem, honestly? So if it's offshore wind, onshore wind, solar, hydro, nuclear, I think we need to consider all options. Then it will always be up to on a national level what you feel comfortable and prefer. But I think my send along is I would love a situation where we are sort of having too much energy in Europe. I think that will not for sure be in my days. And again, I would call out, imagine you go to the US, you're a glass maker, you're a steel maker, you're a chemicals maker, and you go to southern US and they say, come and build your factory here. We can guarantee you maybe a 10 to 15 year energy contract at half, a fourth, a fifth of the cost. I think we're all Europeans. We want to do business in Europe, but we have to be realistic. I mean, we want our companies to survive and thrive, and that's why we also see production moving. And it's also always, backtracking a bit to your earlier question, we always talk about the move of the factory. It's so symbolical. All politicians love to cut the ribbon of a new factory. But what I always call out, if you look at the companies that are already being global, they have a manufacturing footprint that you can switch production between. So before you even move the factory, you move capacity to other regions. And I think for sure, not calling out the different board names, that's the play you're doing now. So I think we need every kilowatt hour out there, every kilowatt hour. And I can only refer to putting on the sort of the Swedish hat, which I don't do often. In Sweden, there has been this discussion, and I think there's a common agreement that we don't have the opportunity to choose. So they're looking into both offshore wind, onshore wind, nuclear. Solar might not be the thing in Sweden, but we probably go a bit along that line as well.
In Spain, solar is strong. What is Business Europe's opinion of the labor reform in Spain in some controversial aspects like fixed discontinuous contracts, as we call them? Do you think that with the weak competitiveness of Spain, this is the right time to talk about a reduction of working hours, 34 hours a week, 4 days a week? Do you think that is possible in Europe?
You would be really surprised if I digged into this one, wouldn't you? For me, the key in these type of discussions, and I will not only play the national card now, is the social partnership. I think, for starters, we talked a lot about regulation. I, again, grew up in Sweden where we try to minimize the government's interference in the labor market. I think it's always better to sit down at the table and have the discussion. And my experience is that you can then always reach the agreement. You cut out the lengthy regulation times and whatever. You look each other in the eyes, because at the end of the day, the only way to social progress is economic progress. Someone might not agree with me, but this I stand firm on. And I think the question is rather now in any country, be it Spain or in Sweden or in Holland, let's first, in terms of priorities, you always in life have to prioritize. And if I would do the prioritization now, I would prioritize competitiveness, because that will lead to economic progress, which will continue to build on the good social progress we have in Europe. Then I will ask Co-Pres to tomorrow if could you add some extra time on my work schedule, because I think, at least on our side, more hours are needed, not less.
Marcus Lema from El Confidencial says that the German industry has received half the aid that was given in European countries during the inflationist crisis. The government and the COE in Spain reflect permanent flexibilization of state aid. What is the position of Business Europe? Do you fear that the single market will be fragmented? Mr. Lopez Quesada, head of Alcoa, asks, what should change in terms of state aid or taxes, perhaps? And Santiago Gonzalez asks, what do you think about fiscal harmonization in the European Union?
I think what you're referring to is probably the letter that was sent by Commissioner Vestager, sort of listing the size of the state aid paid. I think one thing, of course, looking at that one, you do have to take into account, I won't get into a numbers game, the size of the country. So by nature, I mean, Germany will probably pay out more than Finland. For me, I think all of us that are within business and industry, so to speak, we want to stand on our own feet. I think a company will never be competitive unless it's out of its own force. Then there might be situations where you temporarily needs support not to end up going out of business. And of course we've had shocks in the system that we've never seen before, again like the pandemic. But competitive industry and business can never be built on state aid. Never. So I think for me it's key is that it's to the point made. I think it should be short-term measures, and that's what we've been pushing for, a temporary crisis solution. And I'm always also concerned about the fragmentation. I think we need to take care of the single market because it is our diamond, and we have a lot of discussions regarding fragmentation also when it comes to the due diligence file. When other type of regulation can be used to create fragmentation between the country. No, we want a level playing field within Europe, and it should be seen as one market. But I mean, to that point that I said earlier, the need to deepen the functioning of the single market. We have a way to go, and I think we're taking the single market much for granted. And on taxes, again, I think that is for sure something that's decided on national level. I think probably over time, and it will sort of reach some type of similar level, but that is, I think, not for the EU to call out.
Two questions to finish. We don't have time for more. Pedro Gonzalez says, President Persson, in your trips all over Europe, have you seen a country where businessmen are criminalized as they are in Spain? On the other hand, Juan Miguel Sugunza, who is chairman of the Confederation of Navarre Businessmen, would like to has a proposition for you. Could you, and Chairman Garamendi, could you send a letter to President Sanchez with 10 recommendations about what to do for our country? One of them, support of industry.
Carta Sánchez.
I think on the first one, I've been briefed a bit about and not knowing sort of all the specifics on what you're describing as the Spanish situation, but I must say I think it is concerning, and you know where I'm coming from. I'm extremely happy because I think in President Garamendi, you have a person that will stand up for you as members every single day. Antonio will sort of never accept any bad-mouthing of industry. No, I mean, I think that is sort of setting a good example. And honestly, I don't know, why should you do it? Why? And I get back to where I started. Economic progress will lead to social progress. If we want to continue to have a strong and resilient Europe, that starts with competitive industry and business. And that's what you in this room are delivering. So it's not shooting yourself in the foot, God forbid. It's more moving the gun to the head. I think we should salute business and industry. Like in everyday life, will there be some bad examples? I mean, of course, you will always find a company that's not abiding to the rules. But I mean, that is not what I see traveling across Europe. What I do see is the lack of understanding, the connection between sort of the importance of industry and business, and that is my mission, that is my passion, and I know it's being echoed in COE. On the suggestions, I love suggestions. As Antonio told you, we're going to have this meeting the coming 2 days, and always when we have these biannual meetings, we come up with a declaration, sort of the key points for the presidency, what we need to be delivered. We will hand that together over to a representative of the government. So I think that is a start. Maybe we can, we'll see if we can build it more or venture out in something. But and also I would turn it around. You are important in this process as well. So in your everyday life, in your contacts with politicians and local authorities, keep on pushing the message. You are the backbone of Europe. I for sure will, and I'll finish off where we started. See me as your president. I'm proud to be able to represent Spanish industry and business. I couldn't wish for a better cooperation or a member like COE. It's not only an inspiration, but it is a prerequisite for us to be able to do a good job in Brussels. So, thank you.
Voy a darle un último turno.
One last turn, as we usually do, so that you can give us your last messages. But before that, let me give the floor to Javier Giron, so that he can take the floor on behalf of the 3 companies that, with their sponsorship, make it possible for us to hold this event: Aruba, Evolucio, and Sophos. Javier is the sales manager. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I just wanted to thank all of you on behalf of the 3 companies.
And please, you can continue. Thank you.
Presidente Persson.
President Persson, your last words.
I almost said if you haven't got my message by now, I've done something something wrong. So this is where I say we need more regulation. No, the Spanish presidency is hugely important. I think that would be my send-along. I understand that there are challenges with the elections, but it's 6 months that's well spent will make a difference. So let's together really push for that happening, because there are some extremely important files that are being on the table that you as a country will influence. That will set the tone for upcoming presidencies. So don't only see it as 6 months, it's the beginning of something else that will last much, much longer. Whatever the politicians say or claim, that is a fact. And in one word, it's about competitiveness. Competitiveness, competitiveness, competitiveness. And the key for that competitiveness is to get competitive energy prices and an ample supply of energy. It's stopping not only the inflation, but the regulatory inflation. The 25% on reporting is a good step, but if we have a Fit for 55, there might also be a regulation for 55 to walk hand in hand with that. And I would like permitting to be, we should win the World Cup of permitting. We should win the World Cup. We should be sort of standing there saying that the ease of doing business in Europe is the best in the world. Thank you.